Interview with Grace Downer by her daughter Catherine Neal. Today's date is February 24th, 1994. First we're going to talk some about places she lived and where she was born, that kind of thing.
On August the 26th, 1903, I arrived at the top of the hill near the little manufacturing company plant. My mother and father had one room in the house with a Mr. and Miss Sellers. And we moved from that house down to the bottom of the hill, and another house across the yard from my grandmother. And every morning, if I could get out the door, when I got to where I could walk, I'd go to Grandma's house, drag me a chair up to the table where she was making biscuits, and help her make biscuits. That's where I learned how.
And it's still good.
From there, we moved a little farther away from there. Well, it was still at that near Little's Mill, but it was in another house.
Is this the new one?
In a new house. One night, while we lived there, the warehouse at the mill had a fire in it, and everybody was running, trying to get out of the way of the fire. And I was so afraid I was going to get burned up, I didn't know what to do. But anyway, we didn't get hurt. We stood out on the porch and watched the fire burn. And my oldest brother had typhoid fever when we lived there.
That was Uncle Claude.
We moved. My daddy quit working at the mill, and I guess he was hunting another place to work. Anyway, we moved uptown on Lee Avenue in a little green house.
That's across the street from almost from the caudal, that big caudal house, I think.
It's about 3 houses up the street. And there was Claude and Vance and me were the children. And we had sore eyes while we lived there. All I can remember about living there is Mama stretching us out on the floor in the morning and getting a pan of warm water and mopping our eyes so we could open them. We didn't live there but a short while.
Is this where you lived when you went to school? That
No,
one day?
no. I hadn't got to school then.
Sorry I broke your line of thought.
It was after I went to school one day, though, because I didn't go but one day.
How come?
You want me
Yeah, I
to-
want you to tell us why you didn't go but one day to school. What's there in Wadesboro?
Well, the first day I went to school when I was 6 years old and came home, my mother asked me about school, and I said, well, Mama, the girls up there pulled up my dress to see what kind of underwear I had on. So I didn't go back to school anymore there. One day.
Okay. And you were 6 when you moved to the country?
That was the same year. Must have been later that fall that we moved down to the Byron Henry place, way down on the creek.
Smith Creek.
Yeah. And we lived there 2 years, I know, because my oldest sister was born while we lived there. And I learned to milk a cow when we lived there and learned to wash diapers.
A good thing to know.
And well, say more about that. Papa was always trying to find a better place. So after 2 years there, we moved up to Brown Creek and spent 1 year in a shanty by the side of the road.
Is this one where the snow came in?
Yes, we lived there through the next Thanksgiving. And it was cold weather, and the house was so sorry till we waked up on Thanksgiving morning and there was snow on the beds. So we moved back to Lowellsville. And then is when we moved to the Locust Tree place. That was still on the Henry farm. We lived there several years, I don't remember.
Well, did you go to school when you lived there?
Nope, I didn't go to school when I lived there.
Okay.
I did go one. Oh, I'm all mixed up.
Would it help if I'd stop asking questions and just let you go ahead and tell me about the Locust Tree place?
Well, that was long after I went to school one more day. We lived down there on the creek. I went with some neighbor children to school one day. And we had to walk about 3 or 4 miles to get there. And when we got back to the neighbor's house, it was nearly dark, and I was afraid to go through the woods home, so I sat down. And Papa came on the mule and got me and took me home. So I went to school there one day. And I didn't go to school anymore till we lived at Brown Creek.
The second time you went to Brown Creek?
No,
That was the first time.
I didn't go to Brown Creek but one time. We couldn't stand it no longer. When we lived at Brown Creek, my desk mate was Phoebe Hildreth. And we got to playing with the inkwell one day, and the teacher was we had a man teacher, and we were picking at the inkwell, and it had a lid on it, and it had to make a little noise. First thing we realized, our heads popped together. The teacher had walked up behind us and put our heads together to make us hush. Then we moved to the Locust Tree place.
And what went on at the Locust Tree place?
Well, hard work.
That's not the year you lived on rabbits, is it?
No, that's the first year we moved to the country.
Oh.
That first winter.
Down on the creek. Then from the Locust Tree, where did you go?
Don't interrupt me.
Okay.
When I think of it, I'll tell you. We lived there, we moved there in 1912, I believe, and we moved over back of Olivet Church in 1916. And I went to church there. Well, we all did. World War I broke out. And a lot of things went on. 1918, the day that the armistice was signed, we were moving back towards Lowellsville. And the bells were ringing and whistles were blowing and all kinds of noise were going on. We moved to what I always called the hooker place. And we lived there till the winter of 1923. mother and 4 brothers all had smallpox while they lived there.
At the Hooker place, or? And that's when you, is that when you worked or when you went to school some in Lawsville?
I went to school all the time after we came back from
Brown Creek.
Brown Creek. What little bit of time I got to go, I went about 3 months a year.
And one year you did so well, you didn't go about 3 months, but you made 2 grades.
Oh, that was when I first started down there. I went through the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade in 1 year.
But I know you had
And it was just one short term, about 3 months. And this is a mess. I'm just...
That's all right, but it's coming together, because I know when you lived out there, you were going to that old red brick schoolhouse in Lawsville some too.
That's where I went to school. All the schooling I got, practically.
And you didn't get finished that last year, but you still had a 94, 96 point average.
No. I got to go to school 1 year till school was out, and I was in the commencement at the red brick school. You didn't have any 94 point average.
Well, it's in Emma's book that you did. In her first type talk book, it had yours and Miss Cubby Walls.
Oh, we were all in the same grade.
Must have all been pretty smart too.
Well, most of them were, I reckon. Fred Lyles and Nelson Lyles and Graham Wall, Pete. They used to come and borrow my arithmetic paper every morning so they could copy it as soon as I got to school.
That sounds familiar. Then when they moved to, had everybody been, all the children except Glenn been born before you moved to Grassy Island?
Wait a minute now, let me think. When we moved to Grassy Island, while we lived down there, they all had smallpox. Mama and Claude and Vince and Harold. Like Kathleen had 3 bumps on her. She got just a taste of smallpox at school. And that's all she had. And Matt was born in 1920. I can tell you when every one of them was born.
And where you were living too? Why don't you do that?
Well, I was born at the old mill. And Claude was too. And Vance, we were all born there. Not in the same house, but I told you Claude had the typhoid fever. Well, we moved down on the creek. Ruby was born. Now, I've already told you that. That's, well, we moved to the Locust Street place. Kathleen was born there. 5 years later, on the same day, Harold was born there, 1918. Kathleen was born in 1913. And we lived at the Hooker place when Matt was born there.
Where was Uncle Jack born?
At the Locust Tree.
And at Helen?
Helen was born when we lived over there back of Olivet. She and Harold both.
Okay. And then when she had smallpox at Grassy Island, when she lost the baby, that baby she was pregnant.
Mama had it, yeah. We would all have had it, but the rest of us were vaccinated. Well, I was vaccinated. Papa got so mad at me.
You were working then, weren't you? And where was that now, Mr.?
At the Hooker place.
I know, but where were you working?
Seago store in Lyle.
Is that Furman's granddaddy or his daddy?
That's Furman's uncle. His daddy and T.B. were brothers.
They sold what? Dry goods?
General merchandise. They sold shoes and clothes, men's clothes, and, hardware and food stuff and everything you could think of, just about.
But down at Grass Island now, when you were down there, that's where you got married, isn't it?
9th of November, 1924.
Tell me about your wedding dress.
Oh, mercy. Well, it was satin back crepe.
It was gray, wasn't it?
And I had some bright gray suede shoes to match it, and a gray hat. And stockings. I was working. First outfit I ever had.
You didn't make yourself. Well, you made that.
I made the dress. Made all my underwear and everything.
You made a lot of the clothes most of them wore, didn't you?
Yes, after I was about 12 years old, I did all the sewing that was done. From then on.
Tell me about when you used to have to work in the field.
I did, but I worked in the field all the time.
Well, one time you told me about Grandma going to the field and you
Oh,
left you to cook.
that was when we first moved to the country in the spring. Mama had to go to the field and help Papa get the ground ready to plant cotton and corn.
Left you home to cook.
She told me that, she said, Grace, when it gets 9 o'clock, wash these butter beans and put them on to cook. I'll come at 11 and cook the bread. And when she got to the house, it was all sitting on the table. Smart aleck.
Yeah. But you proved to her how smart you were, 'cause then you had a lot more to do, I bet.
I had a lot more to do all the time, honey.
So tell me about Uncle Jack and his dishwashing, if he didn't have how many plates?
That was after they moved. That was after I was married.
Okay.
Well, there was a house full of them still after I got married. And Jack and Kathleen, I reckon, washed dishes together. I don't know who did. But they told it on them, or he told it on himself, that if he didn't have 12 plates to wash, he'd go get some clean ones and put in with them. They did a lot of things to have fun with.
Is he the one that was so stubborn he wouldn't?
Yeah, when he was a little boy, we lived over at the back of Olivet. One afternoon came up a summertime shower. It was just pouring down rain. There was a little porch went out by their room door. And we were all sitting up there against the house till it quit raining. And Jack had a straw hat. And he sailed it out in the yard in the rain. Papa told him to go get it. And he didn't budge. He told him 2 or 3 times. Finally, he took a plow line, I think, and folded it up, and he got hold of Jack. I thought he was going to beat him to death, but he still didn't go out and get his head. That's all for to tell about your brother.
That's part of growing up. What are some other things they did that were wild? These are all the Tarleton boys we're talking about.
Well, when we lived there, they and some other boys got together in the branch down back of the house and made them a pond that they could play in. And I wanted to get in that whole water so bad I didn't know what to do, but I was a girl and I wasn't allowed.
Discrimination already.
We grew up with it. One time they found Papa and some of the Henrys found a bee tree over in the woods back of our house. The Henry boys had one of their sisters and a friend that was a girl that was visiting them. They came over and they allowed me to go with them. And we sat with our feet in the branch while the men cut down the beet tree.
To get the honey?
They got the honey out, had a dishpan full.
That made a lot of sweetening for a while, didn't it?
I reckon so. Papa had a watermelon patch out in front of the house and grew such big watermelons that you couldn't hardly pick one up. They weighed 50 pounds apiece. And when he sold them, he charged a penny a pound.
Goodness.
He cut them off, cut the watermelon. They were 36 inches long.
What kind were they?
I don't know. They were green. That's all I know about them. But they were good watermelons. And you'd have to cut them in two cheaper. We couldn't pick them up. I mean, hold a slice, it'd fall to pieces. We always had a watermelon patch, and we always tried to have a ripe watermelon on the 4th of July. That was our first watermelon.
Well, that first year you lived down here in the country and lived off, what did you say you had? It was in the fall, so you didn't have any crops. So you lived on rabbit.
When we moved down on the creek, of course we had some chickens, but we didn't have any cow, and they had, I reckon it was Miss Henry's mule, I don't know. He had a mule. But Papa made some rabbit boxes and set them around, and he'd go squirrel hunting when he got a chance. And we had plenty of squirrel and rabbit to eat that winter. Plenty of eggs and a chicken once in a while. When he'd go out to Lowesville, sometimes he'd get a little piece of cheese.
And what'd you get for Christmas that year?
I don't remember.
I remember one time you told me you got thread and...
Oh, well, that was a little later on. That was when we lived at the locust tree place.
And what was it you got for Christmas?
I got 2 balls of thread about that big, and a steel crocheting needle, and that tatting shuttle that I still got.
And so you made lace?
No, I had to learn how first. I got my thread and stuff and took off to Miss Newton's, Susie Adcock's mother's. She lived over there, just past Buddy's store.
Buddy Goodwin's store.
And that house is it's a different house, but it's in the same spot. And she could crochet and do those things. I don't think she ever made any tatting, but she did some pretty crochet. And she'd help me, and I'd make a mess and pull it out and start over, and I got that thread so black till it, I don't know whether it ever got white or not. And some of the girls at school had learned to make tatting. And I got my shuttle filled up with thread, and I took it to school. And I kept fussing with it till I finally learned how.
Now, I remember Miss Covey's doing that before she died. She just had big rolls
Well,
of it.
everybody learned it at that time.
At that time.
We were about 10 or 12, somewhere along there.
What did the boys get for Christmas?
Honey, I don't know
You
what
don't
we got.
remember?
No. One time, when Vance was a baby, that must have been 1908. I reckon he was born in September, so I reckon it might have been that Christmas. I don't know. Mama took us children and went down to her brother's down at Clio, South Carolina. I think that was the name of the town. Hamer, South Carolina.
Is this her half-brother?
No, that was her whole brother. She didn't have any half-brothers.
McKinney.
Uncle John McKinnis. He had John Allen, I believe was his name. Anyhow, Santa Claus came to see us down there. And when we got back home, he'd been to see us at our house, too. doll at both places. But I can't remember anything about anything else. I went to Sunday school at the chapel on the street there at the Little Mill. From the time I could walk till we moved to the country.
Is that a Baptist church?
It was a chapel.
Chapel, but no denomination.
No. But the Baptist was one that was running it, and I imagine the Littles had a lot to do with it. But anyway.
And they're mostly what, Methodist now?
No. They were Baptists, I think. I don't know.
I know one of them's on the board for Pfeiffer's wife. I think
that was Tom, wasn't it? He's dead now. I don't know. They might have been Methodists. I don't know. But anyway, that little chapel was just a little old place down there that the children that lived at the mill could go to Sunday school in. Some of the big folks uptown would come down and lead the singing.
such as? Do you remember any of them from uptown? the big folks from uptown.
I thought I could think of one man's name, but I don't know if I do. They always had a holly tree for the Christmas tree, and it had candles on it, and all the presents were just hung on the tree or laid up on the branches. They were not wrapped up. One year, Mama's youngest brother, he lived with her sister that lived there at the mill. He gave me a red glass lamp, little toy lamp.
Was it just hung on the tree?
I reckon it was.
Well, one year somebody hung, was this out of all of it that somebody hung sausage on the tree?
Oh, that was at Fall Branch.
Fall Branch.
That was after I was grown.
And somebody, well, tell me about
Mr. Bun Price, he liked to pick at me. He was a good old fellow, though. And I don't know how come this tale of, not a tale, the subject of stuffed sausage came up, but one Sunday at Sunday school, I reckon, we were talking about it, and I said I sure did like it. So when Christmas was, dismantling the Christmas tree, there was about a yard long string of stuffed sausage hanging on the tree for me.
That's a nice present.
I thought it was at that time. He went possum hunting with us 2 or 3 times during that time.
You got married in 1925 and
24.
And what happened to your mom and dad? Moved from Grassy Island
To Wade Mill.
and that's where Glenn was born. And he was born in 1925, wasn't he? And you lived out there in the country close to, well, on what's known as, it was
Ingle Mountain Road.
What used to be Ridge Road, with your mother-in-law. And,
For 23 years.
you want to talk about that?
I was just trying to think.
Who were some of the girls you played with?
I didn't do much playing.
Well, who were some of your friends?
Lizzie Sellers, Wilma Huff. Well, I didn't play with her because she lived in town. I lived out in the country.
She was a townie, huh?
Fannie Mae Edens was a good friend of mine when we were growing up.
Is this
to their house one Sunday. I don't know why I was there. I reckon it was at lunchtime. Anyway, Miss Edens was cooking hoe cake biscuit bread on a little old teeny stove. I didn't tell you what size stove we had there.
No, you didn't.
And she had it up in a, I reckon it was a griddle, what we called a griddle then. And she'd do her fingers like that and just keep it turning, and it browns so pretty. Boy, that was good bread.
What kind of stove did you cook on?
When I learned to
When you
cook,
learned to cook.
it was about so big square and had 4 eyes on it, about this high.
Did you have an oven?
Yes, it had a little oven in it.
When you used wood?
Sure.
To heat it with.
Yeah.
Bet it got pretty hot in the summer, didn't it?
Well, we just ran through and tended to things. We was going around so fast we didn't have time to stop and get hot much. You got hot, you just sweated and went on. But that was after we, not when I first moved to the country. Oh yeah. I was going to tell you something now. Right.
Tell me about all the places you worked.
Shoot, I didn't work anywhere.
You've worked all your life.
I worked on the farm, chopping cotton.
And then you worked in the store.
Well, when I quit school and went to work so the others could go to school, supposedly. I stayed at Aunt Daisy's 2 weeks one year, that first Christmas, and worked at Hart's department store uptown. She'd bring my lunch up to the store every day in a little basket all covered over with a white napkin. And I spent everything I made during that time on Christmas presents for my family.
Aren't you glad you had a job so you could do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then you worked at the Seago store.
I worked there the year that I got married.
And then you worked raising children, your own, until you worked in the school room, the lunch room.
The year after I was married in November, I worked over at Mills's Peach Orchard, cleaning around the peach trees, putting poison around for 10 cents an hour.
How much did you make at Seago's store?
Oh, I took part of that out in goods. I bought the Kathleen, Ruby, and Helen too, I reckon. I bought them black patent leather slippers one summer. And white organ and made them dresses with crossover collars with ruffles on them.
And the next place you worked was?
Well, when the year before I went to the knitting mill, I worked at the schoolhouse in the lunchroom for a short time. I don't know how long, about 6 weeks or 8. I took Miss Maggie Clark's place. She fell and broke her hip. Miss Ingram had to have somebody. I got to work out there.
What year was this?
Well, it was a whole lot later.
About 19?
It was in
Early 40s?
$1947, I reckon.
But you had started working at the knitting mill before Daddy died.
Yes. So it might have been a year earlier than that. It was in 1947 that I went to work at the knitting mill. That other, it was just about 6 weeks I worked out there. Not true. Then I went to work at the knitting mill.
West the knitting mill, which is now what, Reeves?
No, it's not even Reeves anymore. I don't know what it is.
She made undershirts and stuff.
I made t-shirts and long handles. And I made samples of shirts, knitted shirts.
And you did that until 1950.
I did that till I worked there 18 and a half years to 1965. In 1967 I went to Junaluska for one summer.
Oh, wait a minute. Before that, you came to stay with us during the week so I could finish school.
Well, Lord, that was in, I don't know.
That was right after you left the knitting mill. I guess that was in the summer of 60, the fall of 65 and 66.
Yeah, I reckon it was.
And then the fall of 66. Yeah, because it was in,
67 I went to Junaluska and spent the summer.
as a housekeeper.
Started to be a housekeeper. No, I went to work in the kitchen, making salads. I did that for a while, and then I don't know what, they changed me over to a housekeeper.
That means you were 64 years old when you did that. But even before that, when you your husband died in 1948, and you went down to Blewett's and ran the boarding house too
For 7 years.
while you were also working at the knitting mill and also sewing for other people at night. And you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning
Honey, I got up at 4 o'clock
And
when I
did-
was at the boarding house.
and did breakfast for boarders, and then went to your
But
job.
no, Helen came and stayed with me some. That was, Bill was working off, and when I had boarders, she'd come over there and stay with me. I got it started in the morning, and she tended to it. And then when I got home in the afternoons, we fixed supper together.
And
We
then
didn't have but just 2 or 3 people.
but you still had. One time you had somebody that had a child, probably his wife and child with him. I remember that.
You want me to tell that to you?
Oh, why not? It's so pretty.
I was so embarrassed. I didn't know what to do.
Well, the rooms were big enough where you had what? There were at least two double beds, and sometimes we have 3 single beds in a room.
It seems like there was one time, I don't remember. But anyway.
So you worked hard then. I know there were several years you did that.
I would live down there 7 years. Went in 48, lived in 55. Of course, it was not much of 48 because it was December when I moved down there.
That was before you went back to work at the knitting.
That's how coming to be at Blue Falls. I was laid off.
But you worked awfully hard all your life.
Well, that's all I've ever known how to do.
But you did take a wild trip one summer.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
This was in 1965. My sister-in-law and her husband and her daughter invited me to go with them on a tour of the United States. He had built a travel trailer, and 6 people could sleep in it, and we did our own cook, and it had all kinds of things to use. And, well, I can't tell you how. When we left home on the went southern. I can't tell you where all we stopped.
Well, I know you went down through Texas and...
Oh, we went through South Carolina and Georgia and Louisiana and Alabama and Mississippi, and we went to Mississippi and then to Louisiana, I reckon. And we'd find a place to park the vehicles or the vehicle and spend the night, cook our food, and at lunchtime we'd just have a sandwich and find some vegetables and get them ready on the way. And when we got to where we were staying at night, we'd cook them for supper.
And you did get to go into Mexico and California.
Well, wait a minute. Let me get there first. Saw a lot of beautiful scenery and animals of all kinds on the way, and stopped at a lot of places. Went all the way to California, and we stopped at several national parks going. And one night before this, we couldn't seem to find a place to pull off and stop, but we backed into between some rows of peach trees or orange trees and slept till it was getting daylight, and we got up and got out of there before anybody found us. And right across the street, the road from where we were parked, was what do you call it, to have at the edge of states?
The border Welcome Center?
Welcome Center to Texas. All kinds of places to stay. But we went on. We got to California, and I've got all that written down in yonder.
Because that was the biggest trip you ever went on.
That's the only one of any size I ever went on.
But you did make the full circle up into Canada.
Yes, we went to Mexico and to Canada and all points in between.
And came home.
Went to 39 of the 50 states.
Which is a good trip. And then since then you flew to Washington twice, didn't you?
You're getting ahead of me.
Sorry about that.
We were gone 7 weeks to the day on that trip. Later, I flew to Seattle, Washington to visit my son on 2 different occasions, and I had declared that I would never get in an airplane. But when your child's there, you go. And I got to visit a lot of places on the West Coast during those trips. I stayed a month each time, each trip, and every Saturday he'd take us somewhere. So I got to see a lot of places there. I went to a rodeo, and I went to fairs and all kinds of things. Came back and stopped at the World's Fair in New York City.
You ready to rest a little bit?
Yeah, that's all. I'm not going to say anything more about that.
Last two times I've seen him twice since they've been in. I've seen him twice in the last year.